All right, thank you, everyone. We're still waiting for a quorum of the task force members, but I'd like to inform everyone today that the Steamship Authority and Steve Beatty of MVTV are making an audio and video recording of today's meeting. And if there is anyone else that is making a recording of today's meeting, I'd appreciate it if you could identify yourself by pressing the raise your hand icon, or if you are joining by phone, pressing *9 on your keypad. And when I recognize you, if you could then state your name for the record. Yes, I see Becky Lash. Becky, could you state, is that your name for the record? Becky, are you there?
Okay, how's that?
Yes. Are you making a recording of today's meeting?
I'm not, or I don't think I am.
Oh, that was a question I asked. So,
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it says recording, but I didn't click on recording. I'm going to turn it off.
okay, that's just to alert you that we are recording it. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Okay. All right. Oh, Mr. Cederholm, thank you. We now have a quorum, I believe. So we can proceed.
About that, I had some technical issues I couldn't figure out.
All right. Oh, thank you for resolving those.
Yeah.
In accordance with Section 20 of Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, all task force members today are participating remotely in today's meeting by the Zoom video conferencing app, and all members hopefully will be clearly audible to each other. Also pursuant to that statute, the Steamship Authority has ensured public access to the deliberations of the task force today for interested members of the public via Zoom. At this point, we have 41 attendees, and a link to access this meeting via Zoom has been provided in the meeting notice for today's meeting. And in order to avoid any possible issues going down the road, I'm going to make Bob Davis a co-host. Moved up. And in case I have any internet issues. Welcome, everyone. The first item on today's agenda is hopefully the approval of the minutes of the task force November 2nd, 2021 meeting in public session. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Second. Is there any discussion? I'll call for a vote. Everything has to be by roll call. Mr. Braithwaite.
Brathwaite, aye.
Mr. Brown.
Brown, aye.
Mr. Cahill.
Cahill, aye.
Mr. Law.
Law, aye.
Mr. Cederholm.
Cederholm, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, I just should alert you, I have to leave the meeting at 5:30. I apologize if that will ruin the quorum, but I have another meeting that got scheduled that I could not change.
That's fine. Hopefully we will be efficient and be out of here by 5:30. The next item on the, even though it's a 69-page document. And Michael Santoro he's on the group. Can I let him in? Yes, I can. I can find him. Sorry, here we go. That should be, takes it a little bit, but Michael Santoro will join us, hopefully. He's disappeared, yes. The magics of Zoom. Michael, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that.
That's
Hey,
all right.
Michael.
Would you like to vote on the approval of the minutes of the November 2nd meeting?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay. All right, as everyone knows, on September 30th, the board voted to approve the summer and fall operating schedules for the Martha's Vineyard route this year. And as part of that vote, they issued a report in which the Steamship Authority stated its intention to issue an RFP for a freight service between New Bedford or another off-Cape port and Martha's Vineyard. They charge the staff with drafting an RFP for this service, which we have done. And we've given it to you for a week in advance. Sorry for the length. A lot of it is boilerplate. And the idea is for the task force to give us their comments and their recommendations and proposed revisions for us to then go to the Port Council and get their recommendations as well regarding the draft RFP, and then to present it to the board. And hopefully we can do that before the end of 5:30 today when Doug has to leave. As you know, as you may expect, the draft RFP that we presented is consistent with the feasibility report that the staff had prepared back in April of 2016. We tried to put into the RFP elements that we think most of the communities that are affected would agree upon. And the touch word here is flexibility. Important to the island, we know, is the financial stability of the Steamship Authority. And so one of the things is that the idea would be to have a private operator at the private operator's own financial risk provide the service, with the Steamship Authority's only financial exposure being to provide the use of its Vineyard Haven terminal and also the use of its reservation system.
Potentially.
If the operator were to need those. In this way, we were told back in 2017 by our consultant, Craig Johnson, that he thought there are private operators who are out there who would be willing to make a go of this freight service and do so on their own and be successful at it. And that's the whole purpose of the RFP. We try to prioritize some of the factors that the town of Falmouth would like for this freight service, to give priorities to freight trucks, which is what Woods Hole particularly would like to get off Woods Hole Road, and to give even more priority to hazardous cargo trucks early in the morning and trash trucks coming off island early in the morning. And all of these are evaluation criteria that we've specified in the RFP, which would then be evaluated when the proposals come in with all of those evaluation criteria, and the board would make a decision on balancing all of those criteria and how they're ranked as to which of the proposals we receive would be in the best interest of all of the communities. I can share the RFP with everyone. Another thing we could do, I don't know whether, given the time, whether we would, the attendees, well, everyone here on the task force will be able to talk and interact. The attendees may get frustrated by hearing the discussion without the ability to raise any points. And I don't know whether you would like to hear from any of the attendees first, briefly, about their views of the RFP before we discuss it ourselves. Give them that opportunity to bring the public input in at the top, at the beginning of the meeting, before we go down for a long course of the discussion.
I think we should, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Steve, I don't know if we should start with us. Whatever anybody thinks. Doesn't matter to me.
Well, if you have a couple of questions, why don't we start with that before we have.
So I tried to read through all of it, but my biggest point is on the charge. Would the Steamship Authority have any regulation over what they can charge?
The idea is that we would not. That it would be a matter of simply fair and open competition. We have put that as an evaluation criteria when we put down what they would, how they would determine their fares and what limitations on the fares would they be able to provide. If they are too expensive, there would be competition and they may not be successful. People may continue to choose the Steamship Authority to travel on instead of choosing on a very expensive service from New Bedford. So there would be the private enterprise, the competition between the Steamship Authority and them, which would be the inducement for them to keep their fares reasonable. We would expect the fares to be about 3 times what our fares are, but when they take into account the savings in travel time and the wear and tear on their vehicles, there are some reports that would indicate that that it would still be financially advantageous to them to take the service from New Bedford, even if the fares are 3 times ours.
My second and my third question is, would you limit, are they limited to what freight they can carry? I mean, they can take as much as they can handle. Are there any particular freight that the steamship would take? For example, you have a limit on the Island Queen and the Highline. Would there be any type of restrictions on freight?
Well, the restriction would be based upon the number of trips they would be licensed for, because they would come in with a proposal with the number of trips. And so it's actually the physical limitations of whatever freight deck they have. With respect to the types of freight, we are asking that they give priorities to those that Woods Hole would like to get off their roads. But we can't require them to do that. That's the point. We would only consider them more favorably if they were willing to do that. So if they wanted to increase the number of trips later on, they would have to come back to the Steamship Authority in order to get an agreement from the Steamship Authority to increase those trips. They start with, they may propose to use 1 boat. They may propose to use 2. We would have to wait until we see what the proposals come in at. And the idea would be to be flexible at that time and to negotiate something that is good for both parties. If they do bring a lot of freight in, by the way, the Steamship Authority also can reduce its schedules potentially, but that's getting way ahead of the game. And to see and to have some cost savings in that way as well.
So Mike, that's my third and final question is, what does this do to the steamship budget as far as taking freight service off? You're losing quite a bit of revenue. Does that mean fares, do you have to make up that monies to islanders and regular fares of autos to make up for that, the revenue loss?
Well, those are going to be public policy decisions made by the board at some point. They can either reduce the level of service, which would be cost savings for the Steamship Authority, in such a way as to have cost savings for the Steamship Authority. Generally, although trucks do pay for their cost of service a little bit more than cars do at the point, although not the summer cars that come in for visitors, there are ways that it can be balanced in order to minimize the financial impact to the Steamship Authority. They may unfortunately bring in more cars with the space that they don't bring cars on, the trucks on, but that can also be limited by the Steamship Authority potentially based on public policy considerations. After all, we are talking, if there is only 1 boat a day from New Bedford, that would probably be at most 3 trips a day. So as far as a percentage of the number of trips that the Steamship Authority operates out of Woods Hole, it would not be so significant as the Steamship Authority would not be able to factor that in my opinion. I mean, people are going to disagree along the edges on every point we talk about today. And all I'm trying to say here is that we just have to throw out the RFP, issue it, not throw it out, and see what comes back and have that discussion when we actually get something concrete in front of us.
Thank you, Steve.
Mr. Cahill.
I want to go back to what you were attempting to do earlier, was that maybe it might be wise to hear from some of the attendees with their questions ahead of time that might add value to our discussions.
Okay. All right. So if I could
I
ask,
don't want to be the only one. I don't know how
oh,
everyone else feels about that.
No, I agree with that.
On the other hand, you may ask questions that might stimulate more questions from the general public.
I feel confident that Steve can navigate through most challenges.
I've spent a lot of time on this subject. So I'm now asking the attendees, of which there are 44. We did put the RFP out there in our meeting package on Friday, I believe, and you've had a long weekend to get some sleep by reading it and having that help you get to bed at night. We also gave it to the working group, the Woods Hole Falmouth Mitigation Working Group on Thursday, I believe. And so those members had the opportunity to look at it. So at this point, I'm asking if anyone would like to ask any questions or make any comments about the draft RFP. I have no pride in authorship on that, and I hope to take the criticism all right. If you could raise your hand. I guess no one really has any comments or questions. All right.
See,
So Doug, did you have some questions, did you say?
I have one question. I see you gave a lot of background information at the introduction to the RFP, and I wonder if it would be helpful to mention any information you may have gathered on that acre parcel at the New Bedford Port, and just direct them to the port manager there, if that might be helpful to anybody that might be considering responding to this.
What I did is I mentioned in the background that this task force had a meeting with Justin on November 2nd, in November 2021, and I directed them to our website, which by the time that this RFP is issued will contain the minutes of the meeting from November 2nd, which sets forth all the information that we have gleaned about that. And so I thought that's how I tried to do it. I could actually put another sentence. There's no problem in saying, for information about that site, you may contact Mr. Paulson. I know that Bob has emailed Justin to see for his comments on the RFP as well. He is away this week.
Yeah.
We intend to follow up with him to see whether one of the issues I raised in the agenda is whether we should ask the New Bedford Port Authority whether the RFP can even be developed or even administered in tandem with this request for interest for that site. But on the other hand, we are leaving this open for alternative sites just so that they're off Cape Cod. And there are other potential sites in theory that could be used. For example, Ralph Packer's facility in New Bedford is a possibility. Back in 1999, he did submit a proposal to provide freight service from New Bedford. So those are things, and directing people to the North Terminal 2 site specifically is fine, but I don't want to give that too much priority to make it appear that we are not going to be entertaining other locations as well.
Right. I appreciate the open-endedness of every section of this leaves open alternative possibilities. That's useful.
Jonathan Smith, 4010.
I think that's Doug.
well, he's playing a
Sorry.
video game.
Sorry,
Right.
they trying to call me.
Okay.
Excuse me, I'll make sure the ring is off.
But one of the things in the evaluation criteria, if you noticed, there are, we have labeled you can evaluate them as being unadvantageous, advantageous, or highly advantageous. We didn't put anything that would be unacceptable for any of the evaluation criteria except for the last one, because we don't want to have to reject or feel that a proposal has to be rejected because one of its evaluation criterion is unacceptable. Again, it's going to be a very important balancing by the board of all of those evaluation criteria. The one we put for unacceptable is if they propose a license agreement provision, that's the last one, that a public agency, just as the Steamship Authority, should not agree to. And even then, the staff and the board will simply identify those provisions and have those subject to negotiation. So they will not be included in the final license agreement.
I'm sorry, Steve, where are you on that?
That would be at the very end. Oh, and I can share my screen. Hopefully.
Was that part of the 69 pages?
Yes, at the very end. I guess you fell asleep before that.
Page 68.
Page 68.
Got it. All right.
Okay. And it would be unacceptable if we're allowing the proponent to propose revisions to the license agreement, which is, we're trying to be flexible with the proponent and work with whoever comes forward. Imposes undue obligations on the Steamship Authority and or contains unreasonable provisions that the Steamship Authority as a public governmental entity should not accept. And for example, when we put out the RFP for a management consultant, one of the proponents proposed that the public would not be allowed to know its compensation or anything about its work would be public records. Actually, a consultant did put that as part of its proposal, and that would be unacceptable as a public agency for us to agree to. Now, even though a proponent may propose something like that this time, we would not simply reject their proposal. We would identify that as a provision that has to be negotiated out of the agreement if they're going to be awarded the agreement. There is no hard and fast rule about how all of these criteria are balanced. Obviously, each one is going to depend upon the board member, the weight for each one, and the interest of that board member's community. But we have tried to list those criteria which we feel all of the communities have substantial agreement on. And again, we want to wait until we get a proponent, and it's going to be not a simple up or down, this is it. That's going to be beginning of negotiations with the proponent that is the most advantageous in order to try to come up with an agreement. And the board is going to be responsible for making that decision. For less important requests for proposals, we usually have the general manager make an initial recommendation, but we felt that would put people in too much of a conflict with either being for or against the management, whatever it is. Leon.
Yeah, I had one question. What action do we have to take this evening to move this forward?
Well, I would punt that to Bob Davis, but I think unless this task force were to say, stop what you're doing now, this is not at all what we would want. I think that one alternative would be to say, well, yes, let it proceed and go to the Port Council with that and with whatever suggestions you have. And then ultimately, hopefully it can get to the board. It is now February. I took a lot more time doing this than people had wanted. I tried to do my best at it. It is going to be a long process. One of the things I have in the agenda is what timeline should be, what the timeline should be for issuing the RFP. And we have to give enough time for people to know about it. We're going to have to advertise it appropriately. We are going to have to put it in the various trade publications. A lot of that is online now. The last time we did this, it took months to get those out for deadlines, publishing deadlines, but hopefully that can be quickened. And during the time that the RFP is issued, we will have many opportunities to amend it, to issue addenda, and that can be based upon comments that are raised by the task force, by the Port Council, and by the board as we go forward. So the idea would be to, at this point, possibly to get it out and to get as much comments, not only from the task force, but from others and from potential proponents. And we may come back and say, we have these questions from this operator and they want to know X, Y, and Z, whether we can change it. And the proper way to do that may be to change it before we get proposals in so that everyone is working on an even playing field.
So I think, if I may add to what Steve's been saying, is I think if there's anything that the task force feels would be appropriate to modify, to include that perhaps isn't included, we'd like to hear so. With the intent here would be, if everyone's in agreement, and we'd be moving along to, we'd want to move it to the Port Council and ultimately to the board, and whether that would require a vote here of the task force to recommend this initial draft or a modification there too, so.
Okay. Leon, I
could-
lowered your hand. I hope you don't mind.
If nobody's waiting, Steve, I just would comment that
Thank you, Steve.
Okay,
my first impression was that 69 pages seemed rather long. And I thought that I would have comments and suggestions for reducing the number of pages. But in reading it thoroughly, I really think that everything that's in there is essential, and I don't see any real way of shortening it. So I think it's pretty well done, actually.
thank you.
That's why I tasked him with it.
Good idea.
Some other things by allowing more people to comment beforehand and trying to do it right. Oh, John, go ahead.
You know, I was wondering, first off, it's wonderful. I mean, I'm excited by the potential and very interested in what you guys might see come back to us, because this is what we need to be doing. Is there any advantage to, at this point in this document, to include how the Steamship Authority would allow this change, because it is a change, to happen in terms of marketing, communications, you know, advertising, whatever those components are, to help this entity, future entity, get off the ground and running? Could we include that in the proposal?
All right, let me think about that, because we do, I don't know, that that issue has come up with respect to our licensed operators, and particularly the Sea Streak. When we were putting them, we wanted to make certain that people knew about Sea Streak as an alternative to getting to the vineyard.
Yep.
And so that would be part of our, I assume when we put our reservations, people know that we do advanced reservations. We do the freight reservations first, putting that out there with each time we send out letters to the shippers as to whether they can do that. We should talk about in the staff and see what would be, it would be the only other freight carrier to the islands. Well, actually, Ralph Packard carries a lot of freight and bulk freight. So let's consider that, and that may be an amendment to the next draft. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so maybe it's a marketing communications effort on
Right.
behalf of the Steamship Authority to support whomever would be qualified to take this on.
And it is going to take coordination with the Steamship Authority. And part of the thing is that, for example, if they take any truck from New Bedford to the island, and if that trip takes at least 2 hours to get there, by the time they go back to New Bedford and then come back to the island for the second trip, that's a long time for that driver to wait to go back on that second trip back from the island. And what I would expect personally is that you may have some trucks that go by way of New Bedford, but come back to the mainland by way of Woods Hole, because you get a trip on the Steamship Authority that allows them to come back sooner, and then the driver gets to stay within his or her 12-hour day. And that's fine with us. That's what I think happened back in 2000, 2001. But it still will get trucks off of Woods Hole Road early in the morning, the ones that go from New Bedford to the island. And so again, if there are trash trucks that are taken off from the vineyard to New Bedford early in the morning, I assume that they may come back by way of Woods Hole to the island later in the day. But again, at least they're off the road early in the morning. And that would be an important consideration for Woods Hole. So we're going to have to coordinate our reservation system with the private operator's reservation system. That's why we're making it available, which is what we did back in 2000 and 2001. And but you will notice that for the financial compensation package, the financial proposal, we did not put in any proposed license fees for the freight operations because it's a competition. But if people want to use our reservation system, or if they want to use our terminal facilities, then we are asking them if they are going to propose to pay us anything for those. Because if we get two proposals and one proposal has an operator use its own reservation system or its own terminal facilities, we frankly would like that more than having them use ours. But if an operator that wants to use ours is willing to pay us for the use, then that would be a consideration in evaluating the proposals. Again, it's all a balancing act, and those considerations ultimately are not up to the staff to decide. Those considerations will be up to the board.
And Steve, if I may,
Yes.
to answer part of John's question, is the ideal way to communicate.
Could you come a little bit closer to the microphone?
Sure. The ideal way to communicate, John, would be when we do our bulk shippers packages, we put out all of our schedule for the time period, would be to incorporate their schedule as an alternative, because they might choose to go one way with us and come back with the shipper, whatever. And also we used to have, or we do have freight shipper meetings, and to incorporate that carry with that. So how everything would work, where a lot of these shippers can ask them directly as well.
Steve, it might be helpful if you stop the screen share too.
Okay, sorry, thank you. I'm not good at multitasking. Okay. Julian,
Another-
welcome. Yes, Doug.
I have another question for you. How can we incorporate some language to ensure that someone who's responded and serving this contract well is eligible to have their contract extended? I didn't see that clearly defined. I
Maybe
thought
that-
you did a good
It
list
is
of,
in there.
is it? I thought the list of reason, cause for termination, and that was clearly defined. But I didn't see that it was like guaranteed that a shipper in good standing would have a right to.
I saw something in there about it.
Well, it's evaluation criteria I, and maybe I didn't draft it as well. I hate to go back to screen sharing, but I don't have I decided to save a tree and not print it out. But
What page?
I can't tell you until I get there. Whoops.
Page 65.
So what we did is we said it's not advantageous if they're only willing to do it for 5 years. It's advantageous if it's 5 or more consecutive years. And it's highly advantageous if it requires for 5 or more consecutive years. In addition, gives the SSA option requiring the proponent to provide the services on the same seasonal basis for 3 or more years thereafter. That can be changed, and that may also be something that's proposed by the proponent as to what they want. The proponent may want to come in and say, well, we want an option for 5 years, and if we're good, we want another 5 years. And then we're going to have to discuss that and negotiate that. It's always a balancing, and I've said that too many times, used that word too many times. Sometimes a proponent may not want to be tied to this for many, many years. Or on the other hand, it may want to be tied to it for many years. It heightens the stability of the transportation option to know that a proponent is going to be providing the service for more years, because then people can come to rely on that proponent instead of just doing it for a year or two and then they have to come back. There would be some concern on freight shippers that they will have lost their priority with the Steamship Authority if they patronize this new operator, which will not be the case because we do it all by the process to use freight reservations is not that way at all. So I guess we're going to wait and see what proponents come in with and see what they propose as to what they want. And since they're taking the financial risk, what they want is going to be a big factor in the consideration.
So you'll be willing to amend portions of the RFP to the highly responsive proponent?
Well, we have put in the proposal package, I think, that the proponent sets forth what revisions it wants to the license agreement.
I see.
And then we negotiate that. And if a proponent comes in and says, we want a 5-year term or a 10-year term, or we want a 5-year term with an option for 3 more years, then we negotiate that.
Okay. That's a good answer. Thank you.
Okay.
John has his hand raised, Steve.
Okay. Oh, I see. It's busy. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing again.
There you go. You guys have done this in the past. Can you give me an estimate of how many people you think will respond to this?
I
1,
think
5, 10, 20?
I think we had at least 3, if not 5, the last time.
Okay.
It's 23 years ago, and my memory is not as good. We had various. It was a learning process that we first, I think, had a RFP out for both islands, and I don't think anyone responded, or it was some big problem. So then we issued a second RFP just for Martha's Vineyard to get started. And again, that was a learning process. I'm going to take this opportunity because it rankles me when I heard, and it was done by. Those were very contentious times, as people know, and we were all came under criticism for doing a service that was designed to fail, and it wasn't designed to fail. It's certainly not intentionally. People tried to put forth their best way on what to make a successful service, and there were disagreements about what was the best way, but those were legitimate, good faith disagreements on all sides. And the board went with what they did at the time. I was part of that process, and other people who wanted that freight service to succeed were part of that process. And there were other aspects that were brought up as to why it would never work. It's because the revenues were only 15 to 20% of the cost. Well, that was part of the design in order to get freight shippers attracted to taking the service. We had put the fares, we were in charge of the fares that time. We chartered the vessel that time, and we made the fares the same from New Bedford as they were from Woods Hole. That produced skewed financial results, and it also resulted, my memory is that we had to increase freight rates across the board by 10% that year, which was a huge increase. But it got an occupancy rate on that service somewhere around 60%, I think. Now you can say, even if you fill the boat up with 60%, you're still only making 50% revenue. But still, we think that a freight operator's service will be less expensive than the steamship authorities, and that it'll be up to a freight operator to decide what it needs to charge in order to get people to take that service. And we think people will take that service. And also, at the end of the 2-year pilot project, we were willing, and we had proposed to continue that service with one of our own boats at the time. We aren't in a position now to do that because we have enough service of our own, and we have the need for the boats. And that was prevented, not by the steamship authority. So we're trying again. We are trying to get, sorry, I don't know how to turn that off. And we're willing to take any suggestions and to look at it and move forward. Julian.
Thank you, Stephen. Just a question. I think you mentioned 23 years ago this was last attempted, and that you maybe had 3 to 5 respondents. Any idea whether any or all of those 3 to 5 are still in business?
I don't know at all. We have been talking with Craig Johnson.
Yeah.
He was a consultant. I don't know. He may even be listening today because I think he gets all of our emails.
Yeah.
We will.
I talked with him this past week, and I mentioned that we'd be having the meeting today regarding this. So, but I don't see him on the Zoom. And so.
Okay, but we will contact him. He knows people in the business, And he did, that was from 2017. And we will ask him to contact people. And we will go back, I think somewhere in my hard drives, somewhere I still have the list of proponents back from 1999. And if I do find that, I will find out whether they're still in existence and send this out to them again.
Just a follow-up, if I may.
Yes.
You mentioned, again, 23 years ago, this was attempted. And I'm presuming that the determination was made not to give it another effort. Any strong reason for waiting 20 years to do so? Were there some compelling things that came up in the meantime that caused you not to take another run at it after 5 or 10 years? I'm just curious in general.
Well, we did issue a feasibility study, a report, basically in 2016, which I think answers some of those questions. Those were very antagonistic times. That was before your time here, I think. I know it was. And those were times that created a lot of ill will among the various communities. When we were rejected with our attempt to use the Sankaty for the freight service back in 2002, that ended. There was, I think, personal opinions dominated over what was better for all of the communities in some way, and on every side in some way. I don't mean that as a criticism. It just the emotions were too raw in order to try to do something that you have been rejected time and time again, and you've been yelled at and scorned at every public meeting for 2 years. So we created the Port Council, and the amendment of the Enabling Act, which brought New Bedford on board, was actually a great thing. We actually met great people from New Bedford as a part of that, as part of the board. And we looked at it again, but we were tired of it back for several years. That was also when there was a recession in 2001. So we had a decrease in service. The financial crisis of 2008, there was less service, less traffic. And so there wasn't a pressure on, in terms of ever-growing traffic demands, to find an alternative route. I remember being at board meetings where Bob and Wayne would report every month that our traffic this year was lower than what it was last year. I mean, for 3 years it was going on. So that's another factor that played into it. We also, in 2003, 2004, we privatized the Shamanshi that we had bought in 2001 and were operating. And when we privatized the Shamanshi service, and that's how Seed Streak started, we had to analyze how much there was in savings when we did that. And the amount was staggering. It was well over $1 million a year, even back then. And then $1 million was a lot of money. We started looking at it again when Bob Marshall was the Falmouth board member. He asked the staff to look into it. I think for the most part, the staff was looking at the Steamship Authority doing it and concluded that financially it just doesn't make sense for the Steamship Authority to do it. And I agree with that. That's why we're trying a private operator. And then when Betsy Gladfelder got on the board, she also asked us to look at it. That's what resulted in the 2016 study. And that's where, and that's, even though that's now 6 years ago, we've come up to this, and our traffic levels have increased. And so we're looking at it, and we're also trying to respond to the concerns of the Woods Hole community.
Thank you.
And if I may kind of go backwards here a little, John's question regarding the number of proponents. I think back in 23 years ago, we had identified State Pier as being a viable facility to be used. And as you're well aware, the condition of that facility right now isn't the same as it was 20 plus years ago. So, that may factor into, how many, if any, proponents we receive for this.
And by the way, while we're on, I did multitask. Nat Trumbull has emailed me and he corrected me. And it's because I'm retired and I don't keep up with these things anymore. I mentioned a 12-hour rule for truck drivers, which is what I always grew up with. They can't work more than 12 hours a day. He's mentioned that the rule is now 11 hours. I don't know whether that's correct or not, but I will take his word for it. He's pretty good on these things. So that's just another reason why there would have to be, I think there would be coordination in people using one route to either get onto the island and off the island and using the other route to go in the opposite direction.
I got another one.
Yes, John.
Do you see this as a third party providing the service or as a partnership? And if so, as a partnership, is there anything that potential candidate could use the leverage of the Steamship Authority to help them with financing, capital improvements, capital expenses, or even a grant that could help them finance and get this thing off the ground?
Well, that's what I think we would like to talk with the New Bedford Port Authority about. And that's something that Doug Brown mentioned at the last meeting. I think that's the last thing in the minutes of the last meeting.
Yeah.
So that's part of the process. Probably the politicians who are hesitant to give out money would like us to see first whether a private operator will be able to do it on its own without any grants or things like that. That still may be part of this process before we issue the RFP. If we work with Justin to find out whether there can be a grant for the operator, for the operations that can also assist New Bedford in developing the North Terminal 2 site. So those would, I think we will be having discussions about that. Ed DeWitt had also noted, there are sources of grant funding out there, MARAD, and some of those are just for specific projects. They do pilot projects, and that might be a source for one-time funds. Those aren't as big as other grants, but that still might make a difference in a private operator. So those would probably be subjects, again, as we go down the road. If we get people interested in potentially responding to the RFP, and they say we would need X, Y, or Z, we can pursue those at that time.
You wouldn't want to consider putting some of those statements into the RFP?
I hadn't thought of it.
If we're trying to get a bigger pool of people to respond, that might be advantageous. I mean, you guys know best. It's just a thought. As I read through this, I'd say put my hat on as a potential, in which I wouldn't be, someone to submit. I want to know I have a partner in this.
Okay. So that's
what I'm trying to express.
Yes, and you are expressing it well, and that is something I realize does not come through in that RFP. That the RFP, the tone of the RFP may be much better if we could emphasize the partnership aspect of what we're envisioning.
I think that's what I'm getting at, Steve. Thank you.
Okay.
Good idea.
Right. Well, we're just a half hour, and for Doug to leave, and he might even be able to either have a cocktail or something to eat before his next meeting.
Certainly not a cocktail. Although it might help the next meeting a lot. Yeah.
All right. There's some, okay, chat. From the chat, Chris McGuire could you describe who, in addition to SSA staff, will evaluate proposals and what the role in decision-making will be? For example, SSA board, long-range task force, etc. The idea is to have a task force here, give comments on the RFP, also to have the port council, and then provide it to the board. When the RFP is issued, if there are any requests for revisions to the RFP from private operators or anyone else, and that time I think that would be the primary source of requests for revisions to the RFP. Depending upon the nature of the request, we may bring that up to just the board or even to all of these groups to see what revisions should be made. Once the proposals are submitted, and that's where it becomes important for fair competition, the proposals will be evaluated by the board. They will go directly to the board, and the board at its discretion will be able to ask for the assistance of anybody it wants to, including the staff, including the task force, and including the port council. But that would be the board's decision and at the board's discretion. We expect that the staff will do the grunt work for the board that we do and actually enjoy so much. Checking on the references that the proponents give, checking on their financial history, checking on whether they've actually been bankrupt or not been bankrupt, checking on their customers to get all of those things. In the past, the board has asked us to do that. We have done the due diligence on the proponents, and then we usually write a written report to the board if there's time, or at least an oral report at their meeting. We expect that the staff will also review the license agreement proposed revisions that the proponents provide us, and give a recommendation to the board as to what proposed revisions are unacceptable or advantageous. But our role at that point is simply to support the board and not to make any of the decisions ourselves. That was the only other question from the chat.
No, there's another question in there, Steve.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. This is from the Woods Hole film or something. Does the steamship have a relationship with any of the offshore wind companies vis-a-vis future shipping issues? If so, have they been considered in this process? And the answer is no, as far as I know. My understanding is that their relationship is going to be with Ralph Packer. I don't know if Bob has
He
any.
hopes that they will.
Oh,
Yeah, no, we have not, been approached by any of the offshore winds, and as Steve mentioned, I think Mr. Packer is hopeful that he can be providing some of those services for those.
okay. All right. This time I don't see any more from the chat.
Oh, we got a new one.
Oh, takes time for people to write. I know that thinking. Oh, this is from Nat Trumbull. Will the task force recommend that the RFP be issued more than once over a multi-year period in the case there are not advantageous responses from proponents after the RFP is issued the first time, unless this question is already addressed in the draft RFP? It's not addressed in the draft RFP. I think, and this may be something, I think he's concerned that there may not be responses from proponents. And that's, to be fair with Nat, Nat and I had a conversation several months ago, and I said my concern is that we issue an RFP and no one comes, no one responds. Because I don't want that to be used as an excuse down the line not to continue exploring long-range planning for the vineyard. And I don't think that issue is before the task force. I mean, I'm not putting that before the task force as to what happens if we don't get a proposal. I think that's going to depend on why at that time we don't get a proposal if we don't. I would rather be more optimistic and and try to structure this RFP so that we do get at least one good advantageous proposal. And it may be, if we don't, there may be multiple reasons for that. And so I don't think the task force now, in fairness, should be asked what their recommendation would be in those circumstances.
I think it's Steve, if I may add, so I think the process, should there be no proponents, but there had been firms that had been interested and want to receive the RFP. If there was no one that came forward, I would anticipate that we'd be reaching out to those other companies just to see what, if anything, in that process we could have improve upon in order to encourage proponents in the future.
Okay. Doug, you're muted, so, and I don't physically see your physical hand. I only see the icon, but go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, in response to what Mr. Trumbull said, I think that's sort of planning for failure. We can always revisit the RFP if it's not successful the first time.
Yeah. But it may have been planted by the discussion I had with him, which is why we were concerned about issuing an RFP before without that. So, but
right.
We're beyond that now.
Steve, did you want to talk timeline? You mentioned earlier.
The timeline is what I would propose. It may take several months to actually issue the RFP. Well, no, actually, it depends on the number of comments we get now. If we were to proceed favorably here and with the Port Council and with the board at the March meeting, it could be issued anytime after that. But the question is, when would we put the deadline for submitting proposals? And I would propose that we leave that several months out to give us the opportunity to advertise the RFP, to talk with private operators, and to get the requests, and then make any revisions to the RFP that we think are warranted in response to the requests. And then give everyone the opportunity after that to reevaluate the RFP, because you don't want to do that within a week or two before the deadline for submitting proposals. So that would be one thing you do not see in the RFP is a pre-submission conference with private operators. And that was my personal decision, because my experience with pre-submission conferences is that they're almost worthless unless you're looking physically at the site. Because no one wants to ask questions in a public session that all their competitors then can guess what they're thinking and what they're going to do. It's better for us to receive the questions, to make a determination as to what we need to respond to all the proponents in the interest of fair competition, and which ones don't merit a response. So if we are able to issue an RFP, let's say by the beginning of April, I would put at a minimum a four-month deadline.
We'd want to look at what the national publications are
Right.
in order to get in advertisements in those, and
Right.
like we'd want to cast as big of a net as possible.
They're going to have to also potentially talk with the New Bedford Port Authority, see what those arrangements are. They're going to have to do some investigation on their own. So I would give at least 4 months for those reasons, and with the possibility of extending it if people ask for good reason. We've often extended.
A follow-up, could we get some sort of draft timeline in the RFP so that we can present that to the Port Council and the Board of Governors?
Yes.
So they can discuss it openly?
Okay. And that is I have blanks in this draft, so the next draft will have dates on that.
Okay.
Okay. Doug?
Is there, can you just tell me what you think for the amount of time that's going to be allowed for the response from the RFP or to the RFP?
Well,
Typically have like 30 days, but this seems like it maybe would need more. Do you think so?
Oh, you mean the response when the proposals are submitted? Our response?
The
Yes,
response. How much time will they have to respond?
well, let me go through that. Once we issue the RFP, we're thinking that proponents will have, in my mind, at least 4 months to respond, because they're going to have to do a lot of work. And
Right.
we will be reasonable if we actually get anyone interested during that time, if they need more time in order to prepare a proposal, because they have to put their ducks in order, or whatever the metaphor is for that. Once they submit the proposals, we may have to, I may have too short of a time period for us to evaluate them and to award a contract and negotiate. Because I think that's also going to take, usually the timeline is 30 days, and that's what it is under statutory competitive bidding procedures. But given the volume of material, which I think we're going to be getting, and the complexity of the subject, I think we're going to need more than 30 days. I haven't even talked with Bob about that, but 45 to 60 days in order to do that. And also for the board to read everything and for us to do the due diligence. And then once they make an award subject to revisions, because that's the way it's phrased, then give more of even another 30 days for us to negotiate with that selected proponent to make certain that we can get a proposal. At that point, those extensions under the RP usually can be extended by mutual agreement. But so that I have to look at, those are details in the RP that I still have to look at.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. If there's nothing else, shall we go on to the next item?
Yes.
And anything from the public? I don't see anyone in the chat asking anything.
No one has their hand raised.
Okay. All right. Topics, topic number 3, topics for discussion at the task force next meeting. I think probably we should talk about the status of the RFP at the next meeting.
There you go.
Okay.
I'd like to know the results of your evaluation of the site, North Terminal 2.
Okay. All right.
Is there any value to the long-term transportation planning group hearing the summary of the feasibility study that was already done and published? Just to give us a sort of like a 30,000-foot perspective on it. I don't know if everyone here in the group is aware of it, but the study was completed back in the late fall.
John's referring to MassDOT had commissioned Urban Harbors Institute to do a study on, I think they labeled it short sea shipping or something along those lines. I don't have it in front of me.
All right. That's good because we don't know how much time the other 2 subjects will take. So we'll add that to the agenda. Anything else? And I can get back to everyone later with the proposed times
For the RFP.
for the RFP and also for the next task force meeting. We may want to wait until after the board meets on March 15th in order to establish that. Or we can go ahead now.
I'm up for a meeting. Set it, put a marker out there.
Okay.
We're all here.
So I would would the our
So
Tuesday,
realistically, Steve, if I may, so realistically, the board assuming the Port Council and Board gives us the green light to get this done, there'll be still some work to do to be able to get this coordinated before the end of March. So I think we'd be looking for a date beyond that, Steve.
Okay. If Tuesdays are good for everyone, April 5th or April 12th?
Fine by me.
April 5th, there's a Port Council meeting in the morning.
It'll probably be the second night of town meeting for me, but I suppose I could still squeeze it in.
What about the 12th?
Both works for me.
12th works for me.
Yeah, the 12th is better.
I have a town meeting in Oak Bluffs on the 12th,
What time?
7 o'clock. But I can make it probably before that.
We get giddy after an hour and a half.
Huh.
That'll work.
Okay.
Yeah.
April 12th at 4 o'clock. Going once, going twice, sold.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for everyone's participation. If you have any more comments or anything along that line, please feel free to send them to me. It will, I think there's something in the chat. We're getting thanks by Donna Hammers for all of this. They want the dangerous trucks off of Woods Hole Road. I'm sorry, Donna, but I have to tell you, not all those trucks are coming off of Woods Hole Road as a result of this RFP. But we're trying to address the problems in a responsible way. And Nat Trumbull is also thanking us as well. And thank you to all of you and for reading it and being supportive of all of it.
North Main Street.
There is, and I don't see any hands raised for any public comment at this point.
Motion
I'll
to
move
adjourn.
adjournment. Motion to adjourn.
Second,
That'd be Leon.
All right, Mr.
It
Brathwaite.
is, John. Brathwaite, aye.
Okay, Mr.
I'm
Brown.
passing your office right now, Bob.
Okay.
Mr. Brown, aye. Mr. Cahill,
Cahill, aye.
Mr. Law,
Laura,
Mr. Santoro,
Toro, aye.
Mr. Cedarholm,
Peter, on mine.
and Mr. Suzo.
Do so I.
Thank you all and have a great night.
Good
Nice
meeting.
job.
Thank you.
Nice job.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.